Who is a bad guy in history who actually wasn't a bad guy? A dingo really ate her baby. This one is so awful. Her baby was brutally killed and eaten. Imagine knowing that about your child. Then she was accused of murder. And finally the entire world made a joke out of it. Even Elaine on Seinfeld. These poor people suffered through their lives so damn hard because people thought the death of their baby was funny. I can't even imagine their heartache. In Braveheart, William Wallace gets betrayed by Robert the Bruce, which never happened. He was loyal to the end. That movie made me so angry. I grew up on it, and loved it for what I assumed was a historically accurate portrayal. Not only is the movie absurdly inaccurate, the real history is arguably more interesting than the movie. There was no need for artistic restructuring. They could have just dramatized the actual events and it would have been a great movie. Jesus was given vinegar to drink by the Roman. It turns out that the Roman military provided their troops with a water-vinegar mixture to drink because it helped them replenish their salt levels after perspiring. So, the only thing the Roman did was to offer Jesus a sip of his own drink rather than making him drink vinegar as punishment or a dig. I tried the vinegar water drink of the Roman legionnaires, and the one that was flavored with local herbs from Syria, Palestina, is actually quite tasty and refreshing. I'm willing to bet that Jesus actually enjoyed his last drink. Machiavelli. One of the most honest dudes in history, and his name is instead synonymous with villainy. Captain Hazelwood of the Exxon Valdez. He is often pictured on the helm of the Exxon swaying drunkenly, going full throttle into the reef, talking like a pirate. What actually happened? Valdez's critical navigation equipment was out of commission. Faxes sent to Exxon and Exxon told them to sail instead. Coast Guard budget cuts removed vessel tracking in the area. Green and tired crew was on duty. Request was made to relief crew. It was denied. XO, who was on con at the time, was inexperienced on the passage and neither requested pilotage. While Hazelwood did drink that day, he was not in command of the con at the time and was in his quarters resting. Hazelwood made a comment that he needed a drink because of how upset he was over the situation. Exxon's PR paid off the media to blame Hazelwood. However, Hazelwood was charged with only one charge, which was for pollution. He proved he was not a drunkard and retained his captain's license, even getting offers to sail again, which he turned down. The real villains are mass media, false news, and comedians, but Exxon's PR spending power to keep the blame off them. Hazelwood passed away last year after the ANNV of the spill. Random fact: the Valdez sailed until 2008 under different name Oriental Nicety. In the film Titanic, the character Murdoch killed someone, took bribes, and generally came across as a right shit. He was a real-life person who was actually a hero and saved many lives. His living relatives were so disgusted that the VP of Fox traveled to Dalbeattie to personally apologize and presented a £5,000 donation to Dalbeattie High School to boost the school's William Murdoch Memorial Prize. Richard Jewell, initially lauded as a hero and a brave man who ran towards the bomb to help. Then the FBI and media turned on him and accused him of doing the bombing himself. Because he was actually just as fucking outlandishly brave and ran toward the bomb to help people. They took his truck for evidence. He had to go into hiding. Made a villain by incompetent people. For years. Finally exonerated and dies shortly afterward. Hades. He barely cheated on his wife and was loyal. He only kidnapped Persephone because Zeus told him to. He's a good father. He doesn't cause death, only what happens after. Also, he named his dog Spot, adorable. People always act like he's evil and malicious. But in all reality, he's a sweet guy. The McDonald's coffee lady. The woman who sued McDonald's after she spilled coffee on her lap received third-degree burns in her pelvic area. She was hospitalized for 8 days and required a couple years of rehabilitation. The media jumped on the story, making it a poster case for frivolous lawsuits. Edit. Corrected typos. Nandor the Relentless Master. You've got to plug the Ethernet cable in. Thank you, Guillermo. I'm familiar with how the ether works. That woman who was accused of kidnapping children because her kids didn't have her DNA, but in fact her uterus had different DNA than the rest of her body. Lydia Fairchild. She has chimerism, so her uterus has different DNA from the rest of her body, the DNA of her absorbed twin. Tom the Cat. Jerry is a menace. There was a post the other day talking about them and how they are actually working together. As long as Jerry keeps running around, the humans think they have a mouse problem, so they keep the cat. As long as Tom keeps showing he's making an effort, they think he's doing a good job. But they are both in on it and just do it to keep up appearances. There's apparently an episode where they work together to get food from the fridge, then hide and share it as friends before going back out and chasing each other again. William Thomas Green Morton died broke defending his discovery of anesthesia. He was a dentist and didn't get much respect from the doctors at the time. IMO, one of the most important medical discoveries. Anesthesia is arguably the most important medical discovery in history. Modern surgery is literally impossible without it. A lot of Tudor women come to mind: Catherine Howard, Mary Tudor and Anne Boleyn. Catherine was sexually abused her entire life, only for Thomas Culpeper to use it to blackmail and assault her. Almost every man in her life abused or used her, and she died a teenage girl. After her death, people made up bullshit about her wanting to be married to a rapist and blackmailer. She was a child. Mary Tudor was horrifically abused by her own father, torn from her mother and prevented from seeing her, even as she was dying, and went on to be demonized way more heavily than her father, who was a tyrant. Mary tried her best with what she had. After her father divorced her mother, she lived with the constant threat of assassination or execution. Her own father was willing to kill her. Anne Boleyn was not a seductress who tried to steal the king. She did not want the king and initially flirted with him to get back at a guy who courted and ditched her. She only agreed to marry Henry because she had to. Even before he met Anne, he was looking for a way to end his marriage to Catalina, Catherine de Aragon. Why? Because the only reason they were Marie was to preserve an alliance with Spain, and that fell through and she didn't have a son. None of which was Catalina's fault. Nor was Anne's. Anne Boleyn never wore yellow during the time of mourning for Catalina. Anne didn't abuse Mary. Henry did. Roscoe, Fatty, Arbuckle. An absolute tragedy and such a loss for film and comedy. Calling Arbuckle the silent era's John Belushi, John Candy, Chris Farley doesn't even do him justice, but I can't think of anything better. Brilliant physical comedian and director, and by all accounts, an absolutely stellar human being who'd give you the shirt off his back without hesitation. He was one of, if not the biggest star at the time. Then his career and personal life were totally destroyed overnight by this bullshit scandal. He was tried 3 times. First 2 were hung juries, final jury acquitted him, and even wrote Arbuckle a letter of apology for how he was treated by the justice system. Didn't matter, the damage was done. He was a mentor for Chaplin, and gave Buster Keaton his big break. It's hard to overstate just how important and talented he was, and what a loss it was to comedy and film when he was demonized and blacklisted after the scandal. His films were even banned under the Hays Code, despite his acquittal. Died way too young in his 40s, basically still a total outcast despite some later movie deals, and it's awful that the scandal is still all most people know about him. If you've never checked out any of his stuff, it's all fantastic, but The Butcher Boy was one of his biggest hits and was the first film appearance of Buster Keaton. https://youtube.be/yochu9qgbt8. Pharaoh Cleopatra. She was actually a pretty good ruler, with her focusing more on her nation than just abusing her position for her own benefit. There's even some records saying that she wasn't even all that beautiful. She was, however, very intelligent, with stuff like how she learned around 10 different languages. Julius Caesar. He was no angel, but he wasn't executed for trying to turn Rome into a dictatorship. In fact, it was actually because he was a political reformer who wanted to tax the wealthy landowners. The Senate had always been very violent to reformers, as most of it was made up of wealthy landowners. They tried to rewrite history to make reformers like Tiberius seem evil for trying to grant rights to workers and small landowners, while death squad leaders who killed anyone advocating reform, such as Lucius Sulla, have been paraded by historians.